velkommen til panelsamtale i regi av Kosmopolit Scene med titelen Arts, Culture and Feminism in MENA, som støttet av Fritt Ord. Jeg heter Julia og jobber som PR-ansvarlig her på Kosmopolit. Og ideen til å ha denne panelsamtalen fikk vi da vi booket Souad Massi til kvinnedagen 8. mars. Med kvinne-, liv-, frihetsprotestene frist i minne, så syntes vi at en samtale om kvinnebevegelsen i Afrika og Midtøsten var noe å rette søkelyset mot. Og så ble konserten med Souad Massi avlyst eller utsatt, og vi flyttet panelsamtalen også fordi hver dag burde være kvinnedag, ikke bare 8. mars. Ja, ikke sant? Og så skal jeg gi ordet videre til Zaina Bali, Managing Director i Mashahat, som skal være moderator her i kveld.
Thank you, Julia, very much. We'll switch to English now. And thank you for this invitation and for setting up this panel. It's really a great honor to be here and to speak on the occasion of Souad Massi's concert. So welcome, everyone. I would have loved to say it's good to see so many of you, but actually I don't see any of you because of the lights, but I feel your presence. So thank you for making it here. And as Julia said, we will have a quite informal conversation, so we'd also like to have you on board towards the end. So we're really not here to trying, to lecture on anything. We're just sharing some reflections, and it would be nice to hear yours as well towards the end. And the topic is quite broad, arts, culture, and feminism in the Middle East and North Africa. Of course, we're not going to cover all of it, but it's just some framework for the conversation. So I'm very happy to have with me a very competent and artistic and diverse panel. I will briefly introduce all of you, and then we will jump right into our conversation. So I have to my left here, Mariam Kyroulos, who's an Oslo-based Egyptian feminist researcher, activist, and a musician also. Next we have Nassim Mashak, who's an Oslo-based Iranian artist and DJ. And last but not least, Enya Setrin, who's an actress and political scientist. So I love how you all have different hats. Getting an inspiration from the concert that we are all going to attend later today, I want to start off our discussion with a quote for Souad Massi. If you all have seen, and I hope you have listened to her latest album, Sikana, on the cover of the album, Souad Massi has covered her eyes with two daisies, two flowers. And when she was asked about the symbolism, she said that she's not covering her face from seeing all the ugliness in this world, but rather she is using this, the art or the flower to give her a lot of courage and hope to continue fighting. So for her, arts and music is a place where she gets her courage and hope from. And I wanted maybe to start off the discussion with a bit of an open question to all of you, where you felt, where you can maybe share with us, whether from your artistic or professional or activist life, where you felt that arts and music has been kind of a lifeline for you. Should we start with you, Nassim, since Iran has been so hot recently, and we would love to maybe get your fresh perspective on what's happening in Iran or what you have experienced.
You need this. Hi. To the quote of Souad Massi and art and use of it and how it gives you actually power. One of the most important and powerful expression ways are art and music. I don't want to even know how the world would have been without these two, and how actually art can cut through stone. It can cut through anything because it's gonna touch us on our senses. So that being said, as an Iranian artist, which has been born and raised actually in Iran, but now I have been here in Norway most of my life. Art becomes even more important. As an artist, you use it because you are restricted. Also, you have to actually think 10 times more how to bend this or go around these restrictions. Like as an artist, telling me this is not allowed to do, or this is not allowed to say, you cannot dress this way or this or that, gives me even more power to do exactly what they ask me not to do. So, so that's not a good thing to tell me. Don't do that. So yeah, and what's going on in Iran? That's an ongoing process which has been actually since last year September been even more fired up. People are more trying every day to actually change this regime, to do something with their freedom, which is taken. As one of our actresses said, they are living in a big prison. The whole Iran is a prison, and which is actually the way it is right now. And the recent attacks on the school girls, the gas poisoning of the school girls. We have more strict laws now, more strict laws for hijab, compulsory hijab in Iran. Women are basically monitored, and it's just it's cooking actually much more from inside, even though the media is now very silent about it. You don't hear much more about Iran.
We're coming more to that question on more the political landscape and the media landscape, but I'm just curious, going back a bit to that point, when growing up in Iran, if I'm not mistaken, one of the reasons why you also left Iran was because of a party or a concert you went to, or something like that?
That was one of the reasons. A chain of events made my parents to think that Iran is not good for me anymore. Like I was too rebel for school, so I had to be sent out to have a life which I can actually experience freedom. So I have been chasing freedom since then.
Since the age of since childhood, or
yeah,
the age
since
of
childhood.
Thank you. Mariam, do you want to share?
No, I mean, but Nassim put it perfectly. But I also thinking about Iran and the role of culture in the latest movement is undeniable. Of course, many of you have probably seen this video of this Iranian artist who collected all the tweets from Iranians, made a song called Barai, or means because of, and all the reasons why the movement is taking place in Iran. And it's also, it would be something that I also want to add on. Of course, Nassim can add to this. This is not the first time that Iranian women stand up for their rights either. Now it gets a lot easier for us to read about it and know about it thanks to social media and other communication means. But listening to Gugush in Iran was, an act of rebellion and all that. But just to reflect generally on social uprisings and the use of art, that's in the heart of any social movement, even though we mostly think we need to understand that, let's say music, for instance, you don't need to be literate to use it. We've seen since the liberation movements against, let's say, the British Empire, in Egypt and other areas in the region, the chants were always rhyming. There was street theaters, all sorts of arts that took place from the people, by the people, to the people. And it was extremely effective and very scary. This is why songs were banned. This is why artwork is banned, because it does ignite something in the people, and maybe later we'll go into those different, recent uprisings that happened. But it's very clear now that in the case of the feminist movement in the Middle East, that art, whether it's music, whether it's caricature, whether it's theater or film, you've seen that this is definitely one tool of resistance that is and I would say it's one of the most dangerous things, because it reaches everyone. And right now, in 2023, it's very difficult to ban, and everything will be leaked, at some point. Yeah.
Thank you. And your personal reflections on the quote.
Yeah, maybe just adding to that, and then turn to my personal reflections on the quote. But I think definitely, art is an extremely effective tool to sort of mirror society in a lot of these countries where freedom of expression is reduced to bare minimum, right? You have no other means of actually putting that into the agenda as part of the public discourse, right? So then you're left with art. So I think we're all very aligned on that. On that quote, I think as an artist, you will always have art as your coping mechanism, whether what you're coping with is gendered oppression, human rights violations, personal crisis, or war. I'm saying war because I just came back from Ukraine, and I met with some incredibly strong, powerful women. We met in this little art gallery, which they had used as a meeting spot throughout the war every Friday night to start discussing art projects. And all these women are now engaging in art projects across visual arts, film, theater, to start sort of envisioning what Ukraine could look like when peace has come and when the rebuilding can start. And it was just extremely powerful to sort of be in a country where there's massive human suffering, destruction, and at the same time you have this strength and resilience, right? And it makes you see kind of the human capacity that we have when we're pushed to the extremes, like these Ukrainian women, like the same with the women in Iran. And I think it makes you also reflect upon what you would have done if you were put in a similar situation, and what you can do to sort of support, right, from where you're sitting today. So yeah, that left a mark in me, and I think also, I mean, sort of with my background, having spent most of my life outside of Norway, working in different countries that are very different from the Norwegian society, I think for me art has been that lifeline, in the sense that it has given me an access to try to understand those societies, try to communicate and maybe feel at home, right? Which is also a bit aligned with what you're saying about the extremely powerful communication platform that art provides in terms of connecting different people and spur social change, right?
Very interesting. We'll hear more also about your experiences as an artist later, Enya, but I just wanted to come back to you, Nassim, because what we've seen in Iran recently, now zooming out a bit from our personal reflections into more like the larger political kind of context or social context that we live in. So we've seen that the Iranian revolution has created these feminist, like solidarity waves across the world, right? With got a lot of attention from celebrities, from artists, even from Norwegian politicians. But I remember also when we talked, so we've been actually talking about this panel last month, so I also started to forget a bit some of the notes we had, but you also told me something that there was something missing in this solidarity, the way you experienced it as an Iranian artist based in Norway. Is there something you want to say on that? Norwegian international solidarity.
I mean, it has been solidarity. I'm not going to say it hasn't been, both from Norwegians and internationally, actually. But what lacks in the solidarity is that they usually are temporary. They come and they stay a short while. And sometimes they also become trendy, which in arts, this is something which I personally am careful about using for other countries or any slogan, any movement, because you can actually kind of also overuse something so that the ears or the eyes don't want to see more of it, which is pretty important. As, for example, a slogan which have been used, Women, Life, Freedom, which was actually a Kurdish slogan, which have been reused by the Iranian movement this year, last year. And this slogan, or the cutting hair, for example, a ritual of cutting hair, which comes from like a way of mourning. And this is a ritual, which at some point it became very trendy. I have seen artists which have just cut their hair and never said a word more about this, like in a performance. So I think these things in art should be treated with respect, because they are actually precious to the ones which are in the movement.
That's a very interesting point. Thank you, Nassim. So, but this is maybe also is part of the bigger problem of the social media world that we live in, that everything has become part of these like short-term trends. I remember when there were these girls kidnapped in Nigeria by Boko Haram, and then you had Michelle Obama, like the first lady of the US, having like a hashtag, bring back our girls. And I'm like, so if politicians are now part of these like hashtags campaigns, then who's actually going to do the real work? So yeah, but actually with Iran in particular, I've seen it, I thought of it as more kind of a more mobilizing, because I've really seen a lot of like international names and politicians that were never, so I saw it as a positive indicator, but now I see your point that it has just stopped there, right? It hasn't carried through. And Mariam, I saw you nodding a lot, but I also want to mention, because you were, maybe to the audience that doesn't know you very well, that you had a lot of, should I say, influence, or you were actually on the ground in Egypt when the revolution happened. One of the most influential pictures for you was drumming across the streets around Tahrir Square. That was, it feels like ages ago, right? 2011. And later on, you also experienced another revolution on the ground in Lebanon. Hopefully, we'll have more successful revolutions in the future to talk about. Next Norway, maybe, if there's a need. But I love how these two revolutions, actually in particular Lebanon and Egypt, why I find them specific and a bit different from the other kind of wave, or actually maybe other revolutions as well, but I feel in Egypt and Lebanon you can really single out that women's movements had a very strong, influential role, while in Syria it was a bit of a different scenario. Libya, Yemen, I mean, they also were very powerful, but not in the way that we saw, like in Egypt. You can talk more about this, but I really am interested to hear your reflections and what happened to all these big women movements and small that sprung off from the revolution. Where are they today? What were the dynamics?
No, I was nodding a lot when Nassim was talking mainly about this performative solidarity thing, because I understand completely what Nassim is saying, because we have been there also as Egyptians, you know, and then we've been forgotten about for a while. So I can relate completely. And I can tell you, yani, as an Egyptian feminist, we've always been inspired by the Iranian movement. And this is something that this for us was a whole other level of bravery in the feminist movement. So it's always been an inspiration for us, as well as the Kurdish movement, of course. And the Jinjian Azadi, you know, this has been something that we've also admired for a long time. But going back to the revolutions I've been part of, which is not everyone gets to experience this, you know. It's actually really funny because after January 2011, and maybe you're all aware of the situation, but things didn't really go well. But in October 2019, the revolution was ignited in Lebanon, and then suddenly it was like a pilgrimage of Egyptians coming to Beirut just because, oh my God, it was really weird. Everyone was leaving Lebanon, the Egyptians were coming in. I think this is another thing that I wanted to talk about, this using art as a form of resistance in the movement by women. I was the first Egyptian woman to carry a drum on the street. And I did it mainly because drums are for men, right? And Zena, the amount of comments that I got. I remember I was in Ramses Square, which is a very crowded. I can't. Of course, there's no equivalent of it in Norway, but it's like it's where the central station is, Cairo Central Station. And I was called all sorts of names because it doesn't fit in the. It's just something is wrong in the image of, there's a woman and there's a drum, and people are asking, where's the monkey? Because it was really absurd. But then I realized, wow, I need to do this even more. And I remember it was maybe February 2012. I remember maybe in that image, maybe the photo that you've seen, I was drumming for 6 hours, and I was bleeding in my hands. And I was like, I'm not going to stop. And when we got there, I remember the most macho fellow protesters that were there were like, well done, And in a way, I was like, okay, maybe this did something. And more women started taking drums and claiming space and all that. But I'm saying that to just say that resistance comes in really tiny forms. And it doesn't have to be a huge, act of, I don't have to be physically in the front line, because I was never really in that level of bravery, to be honest with you. But then again, we need to remember that the role of women in the Egyptian movement of course, it upsets me and upsets many women I know when we read like, finally the women of Egypt are in the forefront of the revolution. It's like, no, they've always been there, always. Like, I just mentioned this example when I thought of the British Empire, because it was very known that women would even throw hot water from their balconies in Cairo. That's in 1919, over British soldiers, as an act of, women have always been there. They're not necessarily throwing back the tear gas canisters, But moving to Lebanon, and this is not to say, because it's funny when we also mention Lebanon, people think automatically that it's a more liberal country, it's more westernized. Not on paper. The situation for women in Lebanon is actually quite terrible. To this day, Lebanese women cannot pass on their nationalities to their children. And it's really like, also with the different religious courts and marriage it's a difficult situation for women in Lebanon. But seeing how they were in the protests, for me it was like an anthropological, it was fascinating because they were physically in the front line. And it was like almost like a tactic as well, because whenever the police, Lebanon was completely different because the Egyptians were feeling safe in the front line. There's nothing in comparison to the Egyptian police. So we would just watch them, and you'd see that when the police was approaching, they start screaming. And they say, oh, they're touching us. Do you know what I mean? So the police backs down. It was just fascinating because they were literally protecting the protests. And this is something that you know what I mean? It was just new for me to see. But also, I just want to get back to Egypt. You cannot separate Egypt, from all the movements that took place after 2011. We had this chant in Tahrir that was very powerful. It was صوت المرأة هو الثورة. The voice of women is the revolution. And I find this very powerful because just thinking about this throughout the protests that took place in Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, Syria, Yemen, and moving forward, and of course in Iran, I think about it in the Lebanese context so much because it was always the women who were singing in the protests, and they were the ones singing the most. I'm not going to say powerful, but the most shocking things. So they were answering after, let's say, Hassan Nasrallah would give a speech. They were the ones to answer him back. And it was not just easy. Like, they were calling him like an old wizard and stuff like that. So it was quite powerful. And also the level of chants and and it's quite artistic. And if you speak Arabic, you know that most of our chants actually are very beautiful because they rhyme. There's a beat to it. And the women would in Lebanon, as well in Egypt, of course. But in Lebanon, for me, it was a fascinating thing because, you know, it was so beautiful. You know how we admire the Lebanese, dialect. And it was so beautiful, but also the use of cussing words. You know, it's definitely it's frowned upon that women use curses, right? But in Lebanon, that wasn't an issue, you know. And it was, for us as Egyptians, we would be like, what are you saying? But it was so powerful. So in that sense, really, the voice of women is the revolution. And it's, of course, in both examples, things didn't go out, didn't turn out very well. But here we are. We're not forgetting what happened, at least.
Remember, I think most of the viral videos that came out from the protests in Lebanon were led by women, and the chants and the songs. So that was very powerful. Enya, I'm interested in your experience as an artist/feminist, kind of a bit of an outsider who also lived some time in Morocco, but you also worked closer with Moroccan artists, and you performed this one-woman theater piece in Morocco in the National Theater. Can you tell us a bit also, like, from your reflections from that experience, and how did you feel as a Norwegian artist, like how art has been different from Morocco to Norway?
Long question. No, but I think it's also good to start a bit with that disclaimer, right? I mean, I've spent quite some years abroad, many years in Morocco doing theater and film, but I will always be speaking with an outsider view. You know, I will always be coming from a very privileged point of view. I will never be able to represent the story of, I don't know, a young Amazigh girl going from Khamiset to Rabat to become an actress, right? So I will not try to do that. But I think the topic of today is international solidarity, right? And there I think we all have a role to play. So yeah, on Morocco, I think a bit back to what we started to discuss in the beginning of like using art to mirror society and bring to the forefront some of those social frictions that are difficult to tackle in a public discourse. In Morocco, you know, you have a few red line issues that you're not supposed to touch. And you do not criticize King Mohammed VI, you do not criticize religion, you do not question Morocco's ownership of Western Sahara, etc., etc. You know, all of these things. And you basically have no national or local media outlet that is free and not controlled by King Mohammed VI. So it means that art becomes very politically important, right? And I think for me, when I became part of this artist environment in Morocco, I couldn't see any distinction between being an artist and being an activist. That was all like a symbiosis, right? And it was a level of intensity that I had not felt sort of doing art in Norway. And that doesn't mean that there's no feminist battles to fight in Norway as well. And I think we'll come back to that. But it does something to kind of it's always politically important. Like politics is always there as part of the equation, right? And I think that is also linked to the fact that becoming an artist in Morocco and elsewhere in the region involves quite a lot of personal sacrifice, and you're taking quite a lot of personal risk, whether it's related to your family relations or social stigma or even, you know, economic risk, right? So it ends up becoming very defining for your character, and I think that creates a unity in this artist/activism sort of community that makes it very strong and very sort of powerful to be part of. And then I think another aspect when it comes to sort of a theatre production process and creating theatre in Morocco, which is interesting and again related to society. You know, if you look at the social kind of, what can I say, the social structure of Morocco, it's a very diverse society in terms of having a range of different social classes, different levels of religious affiliation. Language is a huge topic. I'm not going to start speaking about it because I find it very interesting, but extremely, extremely sort of complex. And that also means that all of these different social groups, they will all have different reference points to those red line issues, which makes making theatre very interesting. It becomes very refined because it means that you can communicate to those who needs to hear your message if the goal is to create this social grassroots movements, right? Whilst the other guys, I mean, the 70-year-old state bureaucrat sitting in his office wouldn't understand enough in order to sort of see the need to censor it, right? So so I think it's a very interesting and effective way to sort of build this grassroots movement from the ground. And that's also a bit how I was working with my theatre piece, which was a one-woman show at the National Theatre in Morocco. I have never seen a one-woman show at the National Theatre. When I was trying to do research, I was like, I can only find male shows, like one-man show. That's like a genre that people know, right? But then we discussed topics of sort of sexuality and gender roles and sort of trying to redefine a bit this monolithic idea of what it means to be a woman in Morocco today, which is a difficult kind of subject to race in Morocco, because I think everything that relates to feminism, sex, everything that could risk inspiring a social revolution, you try to avoid, right? So then we were working in that landscape of cultural blind spots, which I found super interesting, and I think a lot of there's a lot of other good examples of like feminist projects doing similar things in Morocco.
I find it very interesting how artists in many of our countries where the restrictions and censorship is so high that it becomes a way of living and making work to actually learn how to navigate all these red lines and how to touch upon them, but without like triggering the alarm at the officer who's sitting behind the office reading your text. So I find this really interesting. But also wanted to comment on a point you mentioned about politics and art, because this is something I agree with you that politics is integral to a lot of the art scene that we see in the region. On the other hand, I also see it as I don't know, it's a personal view, but I want to hear your opinion. That is also integral to any kind of art. I think I read once a quote that like a very good, what was the quote? Like a really good good film with a high artistic value is by definition or by default a political film. But a film that is made to be political is by definition a very bad artistic film, if you know what I mean. It's like, if you're really making good art, then it means you have actually touched upon this is how I understood it at least. And the reason why this like makes me react to it a bit is because when I first came to Norway, I've been living here for 8 years and doing a lot of projects and activities around Syria. And it happened so many times, and I have it actually on email, like a couple of instances where I was reaching out to a gallery or to a festival and I want to do something about Syria, and then they tell me, but we cannot be political. And I'm like, excuse me, so what have you been doing in your gallery all these years or in your art space if you're not being political? So, sorry, I got a bit... So I just wanted to hear your reflections, if you see, also for you in Norway, do you actually see it possible here in Norway to have art that is completely kind of isolated from the politics of everyday life?
No, sometimes I talk about it from the opposite direction. When people are saying, I'm not interested in politics, I was like, what do you mean? Like, everything is politics, whether your grandma can go to the hospital, whether you can give birth in a safe space, all of that is politics, right? So I think politics is always there, and it's a bit the same with good literature. Good literature would always last because you're able to maybe, I think, at least a lot of examples of that, and also for theater and whatever art form, if you're able to say something that is so credible and truthful about this, it could be a small little experience, but if you can describe that in such a way that is so real, then it also becomes, first of all, it will have a lasting value, and it also becomes political, right? Because it's true. So I think that's maybe, that's how I would see that.
Yeah, and I agree. So the purpose isn't that I want to, create politics through my art, but if I'm making good art, then I must have, I don't know, you, maybe Nasim, I didn't mention because it's a long CV I have for each of one of you, but forgot to I haven't mentioned that you also are a trained artist, not only a DJ. You studied here at the Art Academy in Oslo, and you do a lot of different art projects, so I thought it would be interesting to hear your reflection.
Actually, it's very interesting, this activism, being an activist and artist, or art and politics and dividing them, or it's very hard for me. I don't know how that's possible. Even when I was 3 years old and sitting on my father's lap when he was playing cards, they were talking politics. So I don't know how you can divide actually art from politics. But I have, during my education time here in Norway, I have been actually hearing from teachers which mean I should make art for Norway, or art which is has politic values loses the art values, because then you have been considering it as as politic, not as art. So I personally think like using both of like art and politics in art form is actually a very it's a thin line. You can, I mean, for me as a Middle Eastern woman, I can't escape politics. Like, even if I exist, it becomes political. So, yeah, it's political.
That's the difference, right? Or like, sorry, that's the difference, right? Like, the first case you're describing is basically someone pushing politics on your art projects, which is not what we want to do, which is just a different form of censorship, right? But if it comes from a personal experience and the stories you've lived, then it just automatically becomes political, just as an effect of your stories having a societal meaning, right?
Like that it resonates with the larger. Miriam, you want to say something?
Yeah, I'll add something. It's just, of course, I agree with everything that was said here, especially Anya when she said everything is political. It's literally the air that we breathe is even political. So, and no, but I also want to focus on, there's something that you mentioned in this quote at the start, you know, the artwork that you do with, of course, sometimes you're successful when you think of creating a political work using art, because I think this is what I was just chatting with you now before the panel. It's been actually, of course, in the case of Egypt and many countries where there's a lot of restrictions on what you produce and the state basically has, you know, control over what comes out. There's a lot of, I mean, also doing art with the intention of making it political is quite risky. And the people who do this, even if it's not a great work, it has some sort of influence. And just to mention that I have been working with sexual violence against women for so many years. I'm lost count, but it's like more than 14 years. And I remember one time there was a song that came out, a Maharaganat song that came out like in 2000.
Just explain Maharaganat.
It's like electro shabi. It's a very special genre of music that is listened to by the most working class, and it's like the lyrics are from the streets to the streets, you know, very blunt.
And it's looked down upon from
yes,
the elite.
of course, because you tackle drugs, you tackle everything, and there was a song I remember that I was so happy about, because it says, I will flirt but never harass. And it was the first time this word harassment was used in any artwork, because before then Egyptians used the word mu'aksa, but this guy said taharrush, which is the right criminal terminology for it. And I was fascinated, you know, because that was that's something the upper class didn't use necessarily. And I remember that even though, you know, the song is probably, you know, I don't know if he had amazing intentions, you know, behind it, but I thought that was amazing. So slowly you start, in a subtle way, changing the daily lexicon of people. We actually introduced a new word to the Egyptian dialect because of songs like that, and because of movies that started, you know, tackling issues of sexual harassment and other stuff. And then later you have just a girls band dedicated to songs about sexual violence. And then you have all sorts of things. And I was just telling you now before our sessions, this Ramadan, and if you are aware of how it works really in the Middle East, Ramadan is the season for TV series, right? If you don't, you sit down and binge watch, you know, like 5 different musalsalat, and then you discuss it. Like, we grew up. If you didn't watch the series, don't come to school because you'll be bullied, you know. We don't discuss academia, we discuss how did they get to divorce, you know. But just recently there was a series that apparently like is shaking, you know, the discourse in Egypt, and it's about guardianship. What happens to the children after the spouse, which is the male husband, dies? And in Egypt, the guardianship goes automatically to the brother, not to the mother of the children.
To the uncle of the
To
children.
the uncle of the children. And this is an issue that many people didn't necessarily have to deal with and didn't think about. And suddenly now there are discussions about changing the law and all that. And Ramadan was just a few, Eid was just a few days ago. So these things work fast as well. And again, I don't know if it was made with the will of making it political or not. But for me, I feel if it works, fine. Whatever works in a way, even if it's... But I think it was good art. But I'm not saying that I support bad art. But I'm just saying if it works, why not? Yeah.
Very interesting points, Mariam. I think I'll get back to you, Enya, but not on your previous point. But I'm just curious because we talked about this also briefly preparing for this panel, since we live in Norway and we're talking about also international solidarity. But I'm also interested in the women, like the feminist movement and the women solidarity groups in Norway, because I consider myself an outsider to these movements or to these groups, and I've been also witnessing a lot of kind of maybe more heated discussions recently about, or I don't know, how do you see it, but I feel there's that impression that, we have reached the top in everything, and Norway is a very good, with gender equality, but under the surface, or for those who are following maybe more closely, you would see that there's actually a lot of things going on.
There's two things of equally important magnitude, I think. But starting with the feminist movement, I think definitely what we're seeing, which I guess is also again mirroring a bit society now. I mean, society is both more diverse if you look at it with a cultural lens, more divided if you look at it with sort of a more social class economic lens. And in the same way, I would also say that the feminist movement is also more diverse, which is good in the sense that it's bringing forward more types of gender-related issues to the agenda than what we did before. But it's also more divided in the sense that the sort of old school traditional feminists who are kind of caring about issues like economic equality, labor market integration, those kind of issues, are kind of fighting these new feminists, right, that are more focused on questions of gender identity, intersectionality. And on the outside, you have all of these businessmen that I'm working with, usually, in my daily life, laughing at these feminists fighting each other, right? And it's just a huge missed opportunity, and it's a pity that we're getting there, right? I mean, I think this 8th of March, it was quite good because we could gather around the international solidarity with Iran. But the last 8th of March, I mean, there were two different sort of main paroles. It's what we need is a feminist movement that is both inclusive and that can also play a catalytical role outside of the feminist movement, but actually affecting policies in society, like the feminist movement has always done historically. I mean, I think Gro Harlem Brundtland said it herself. She would never have become prime minister had it not been for the grassroots movements and sort of the grounds that the feminist movement had prepared, right? And we've been seeing it also, I mean, in terms of policy change historically, right? And we need the movement to continue playing that role. And maybe just to answer the second part of your question then, the reason we need that is because there are still a lot of things to fight for. I think sometimes it's a bit under-communicated in Norway how political gender equality is still. But if you look at specific policy issues, there is a very clear political divide. I mean, the Conservative Party that is probably going to enter into government if the polls keep looking as bleak as they do now. They are against Samtykkelov. They're against the new full law of full-time employment. They're questioning the Sex Purchase Act. There's a lot of important policy causes that we might have taken for granted that are at risk, right? And you still have a lot of gaps to fill, and we need the right political direction. Sorry, now I became very political. Yeah. But I mean, we can come back to those questions. But there's.
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to say, I'll come back to you, but I want to say that our time is running short, but I want to open up soon for questions because I really want this to be a conversation, and I'm interested. We hope to see you at some point and could get your questions, but do you want to say some comments to that? Yeah.
this is really interesting because since 2011, whenever we're out giving in a discussion or whatever in a European or a Western city about the situation for women in the Middle East, we're always asked, what could we do, for the women of what can we? And I was always fascinated because I want to say, you're not perfect either. You have a lot of issues that you need to work on, and then you can come and help us out. Because honestly, I feel the moment I think about who can help us out, and I think of the Tunisians. I don't even think of the West because they're so advanced, right? And they really fought for what they have. I mean, Tunisia is a country where economic violence against women is criminalized. That falls under violence against women. They have a bill that is way better than anything that I've read before. One of the best international conventions on women's rights is actually the Maputo Protocol from the African Union. So it's a lot of things that we need to reflect on, that of course everyone appreciate the solidarity of all women, but our struggle is one. So it's very important that, just like Anya said, maybe the day Norway gets down a law on samtykke or on consent for sexual relations, maybe that would inspire countries. So the governments of our region wouldn't say, Norway doesn't have it. You know what I mean? So I feel like it's always important that, we fix what we have among ourselves and we try to stay united in that, in this journey.
The big picture, yeah. Nassim, do you want to?
Actually, I think they both said everything they have to say.
You feel represented. Okay, I have more questions, but let me open it and see if anyone has any question or comment. I can hardly see, but you can help me. No. Okay, no hands.
Make a sound. We really can't see anything. We see some lights, right? Blinking.
Yeah. Now we see the lights. And yes, please.
I'm Nagma Iftedar, human rights defender and political activist from Pakistan. So thank you so much. Anubhav gave me opportunity this. I just listening you because when I contacted some Egyptian, Iranian, and Syrian comrades and some human rights defender there. So Anna, I don't know your name is Norwegian artist. So she told about different to we have now our feminist group, some old and some new. So it's a very big difference in we all see in all countries. In also we see in Pakistan also because our oldest feminist not understanding for us because now is a new problem we are facing like intersex, inter-challenges in many issues. And I don't know about Egyptian. Sorry, because I joined some late. So it's your Nawal Saadawi is a big novelist and big feminist in Egyptian. So we are like reading her and we are trying to find. And when in Iranian women, you are impressive and you are role model for us because after Kurdish and now in Pakistan we have a Baloch woman. She is fight very bravely because in our government, in our many people like that, they're facing many problems because kidnapping and disappearance is and because firstly seen in Kurdish and now is Baloch. So it's many problems we are similar. So we're trying to have a good network, and we are in Norway. They give all opportunities. They have many women, like people are equal rights, but still we are not. So we try because I like a politics because politics make a human. If you know the politics, so you can fight very well, and you know very well what your way. So I think it's very important that we are trying to our networking, try to because it's our life, our fight. So we can fight together so that we have right or wrong. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. I think it's Very interesting comment, because one of the questions I also wanted to kind of ask you maybe quickly is about this, because for me feminism is also about having this grassroots community, and I have to say in Norway I struggle sometimes a bit with this kind of sense of community, because I feel in Syria it was much, you know, lower threshold to actually talk to people and to engage in conversations and to have these kind of spontaneous meeting places, while here I feel everything needs to be structured and planned, and I miss out on this kind of organic places where people just randomly meet and talk. I don't know, how do you experience that or feel it also as an artist, and you, Mariam, also as an artist on the side of your working life? And
I mean, in the beginning, it was a struggle to accept that, because as you say, we come from this society which you can just sit on the bus and start talking about the person's life. She can talk in 1 hour and tell you how her life has been, and that we don't have it here. Very few times I have experienced that, and it's usually older people who wants to talk. But I think it becomes very important to actually selectively make your own. Yes, make your own community and start from there. Yes.
I'm sorry, I started giggling when you were asking this question because I met Zena like my 4th day in Norway. That's like 9 years ago. And then we're like, oh, I like you too. Let's have dinner. And then we became friends. So it was really quick. But this is exactly something that I've been missing here, because what we've experienced in our countries and in our movements is something that is very difficult to explain to people who haven't experienced that. We've literally seen death together, you know, and that creates a bond that is completely different. So you somehow dwell in like feminist love, you know, there's a whole other connection that you have. You sit around and, you know what I mean? Someone would, for example, tell me, oh, I read this quote in this book and it reminded me of this, you know what I mean? There's a level of vulnerability that is hard to find maybe among Norwegian people at once when you move here. But my time, and I remember I created this this WhatsApp group or whatever, and I started adding all my friends, my Norwegian friends. I was like, how about we meet like once a week or once a month, or have a movie, what do you call it, like a movie club or whatever. And people try, but I have to say that recently things have been a lot easier. I don't know, it's of course we understand now that our issues are the same. You know, it doesn't fall under a certain flag. And I just want to also commend the comment from Pakistan, because our struggle is the same. In Arabic we say borders are sand and the struggle is the same. And it's really, I find it really powerful, because there are no borders, are all imagined, and our struggle is the same. But it's very important in our struggle that we become vulnerable and kind to one another and stop fighting, you know, and the movement starts to unite a bit. And especially the older generation versus the younger generation, because that's actually quite sad that there are issues that we still are divided on. Yeah.
I feel bad about the older generation. I hope no one feels that
in the Middle East.
We're not ageist like we don't want to. In the Middle East, not in Norway. Anya, do you want to say something?
I think you put it beautifully, but I mean, Norwegian people are socially awkward, right? And I don't even feel integrated into my own society, so that's all good.
Middle East.
But I think there's also a lot of, what can I say? There's a lot of interesting topics that is really at the intersection between integration, gender equality that we didn't touch upon, and I think there's a role for policy, but there's also a role for sort of local communities, right? And not least for art, to have those different worlds meet in the same way that, you know, I used art to sort of as my lens into the Moroccan society, into sort of Kurdistan, I think it can also go the other way for sort of Norwegian people to learn how to be a bit more, I don't know, community oriented.
Maybe also it's not about Norway, but just because, you know, I've been living in Norway recently, so I've been experiencing this, that we're creating our comfort zones, even with arts and culture and cultural events, that in so many instances we're just preaching to the converted, and I feel like I'm really missing out on that. Like in Syria, I used to have, even before the revolution, heated discussions all the time with people on religion, on politics, on gender. Now I don't have heated discussions because I only meet with the people who already agree with me, and I feel, no, like really, I think it's an issue. I don't know if it's maybe if I live in Syria, and I mean, if the situation is normal at this age, people do that. I don't know, but I feel like we're too much in our comfort zones and bubbles, but I don't know. I'm just blaming it on Norway, but maybe this is something of this age. I don't know.
No, but it's true, that point about bubbles, right? Like I think most people, they live in their little bubble, right? And in each little bubble, there's like a different hierarchy of what is valued, right? Like I felt that a lot in my own personal life, kind of being in between sort of politics and my sort of international career and art. Like it was so interesting to have access to different bubbles, because every time I went into a bubble, I'd be like, okay, this is what's valued here, but something completely different is valued there, and then you get a bit more of a 360 perspective on society, right? Instead of just staying within your little grid.
Sorry, I just want. But another thing, because when we're mentioning Norway, Zena, we need to also. This is very important. What Anya said, it's completely different if you are an immigrant feminist in Norway or if you're a. What do they call it? I never understood who's the ethnic Norwegian, the whites or not. I never got the term, but the white ones. And it's completely different when it comes to tackling issues, because you as an immigrant in a country, you're automatically, you know, expected to be grateful, thankful, don't complain. Things are better than it is back home. So just, you know, ha det bra. But have it kushli, and you know what I mean? So that's when things are really different, because you cannot
always challenge.
No, you cannot do that, or you don't have the. You don't have. It's not safe. You don't have the safety that comes with it. Your opinion is not intellectual. It's automatically you're complaining. So this puts challenges. So that's something else that maybe we need another conference on. But yeah.
That's very interesting. Can we open for we can take one more question? Yes, please. Maybe that, but I also maybe want to add to one thing, like one sketch that really stayed with me on politics, and it was during the elections that NRK made this, where they were asking like white Norwegians about like, oh, when was the last time you had sex? And everyone was sharing, you know, their stories. And then like, who did you vote for? There was just an election. And they're like, no, this is person. And then they go to Greenland. It was a really funny sketch. They go to Greenland, to like the immigrant neighborhood, and they ask immigrant men, like, when was the last time you had sex? It's like, what? Why are you asking me? And then, who did you vote for? Oh, AP, FRP, whatever, Høyre, like they. So I think that for me was really like an eye-opener on what people consider also private and public. For, you know, it's like here maybe you can also have this nice, you know, liberal way of discussing a lot of things that maybe are red lines and taboos in our countries. But I also feel that sometimes talking about politics and getting these heated discussions, people make it, you know, this is my private and I don't want to get into a conflict with you, and yeah.
Heated discussions in Norway are scary. Like, I mean, it's you can see people's face change if the tone goes up, or like if I'm sitting with an Iranian or and discussing very like people think we are fighting, right? So we are not fighting. We're just having very passionate conversation. So heated discussions in Norway. I hope we get more of them.
Maybe we should
with time.
Meet across our comfort zones and then confront each other. Maybe like when. Sorry, I didn't want this to turn into like anthropological observations and analysis of Norwegian society, but it just came out naturally. I think we need to end soon, but I'll just end with one question to you all, maybe on some like inspirational note. If you can share with us who was your kind of eye-opener feminist idol from your childhood that kind of opened your... I'll start answering. It was actually Nawal Saadawi for me. She has actually impacted me a lot in my early years. Yeah.
As I can't pick one. You know, it's very but it's very difficult in the context. This is something as well. The Egyptians, you know, we have so many women. It's not only. I know that my answer also could be absurd, but I've always admired Haya Karyoka, who's like one of the mothers of belly dancing of Egypt. It's an extremely apropos. You know, we're discussing art and feminism. She was the one. She's the feminism behind belly dancing, and how it's an extremely political art form, and how she fought the occupation with belly dancing. So she's one of them. Of course, Nawal Saadawi and Huda Sha'rawi and a list of other women, but Shahin Damaklad, you know. But maybe I'll say Tahia Karuka. Yeah.
I think actually most of the women around me, I can't say one name, like my mom, my aunt, the neighbor. I mean, the struggle of all women actually has been an inspiration to be more and more, fighting more and more for freedom.
I think I have to say actually Kristin Halvorsen. Now I felt very Norwegian, but but I did write a love letter, or like admiration letter, I guess, when I was like 8 years old. I wrote a lot of political ideas and kind of like, and I did get a response from Kristin, but it was not. It was her secretary. It was also called Kristin, so that was a bit of a downer. But no, I think it's for me. I mean, she was really important as a role model. Imagine like when I was in second grade, she was in the three-party government, and she is the former head of the Socialist Party in Norway. And she was pushing a lot of difficult sort of political battles on behalf of the Socialist Party, and I mean, some she lost and some she won, but I think the value of having strong female leaders like that, it makes you also envision a political future for yourself and the role that you can play in society. So yeah.
Thank you so much for a very interesting panel, and thank you to the audience. We'll see you at the concert. Thank you all.
Thank you, John.